Dear listeners, we live in a world that constantly urges us to act, to indulge, to acquire. But rarely are we invited to stop, to observe, to choose consciously. Freedom is often mistaken for doing whatever we want, whenever we want. But that kind of freedom is fleeting. It is not freedom, it is reaction. And reactions are chains. True freedom lies not in indulging every impulse, but in mastering it. Restraint is the gate through which true liberation enters. When we begin to practice restraint, we become aware of the forces that pull our mind, our body, and our spirit. We begin to see how easily we are pushed by emotion, by desire, by fear. And in that awareness, we find a new space, a gap between stimulus and response. It is in that space that freedom lives. Restraint is not suppression. It is understanding. It is the power to say, I could, but I choose not to. That choice is strength. That choice is clarity. That choice is freedom. The wind is free because it moves with purpose. The tree is rooted and still, yet it grows toward the light. Both have restraint and both are free in their own way. So when you feel the urge to act without thinking, pause. When you want to speak from anger, breathe. When your mind tells you, this is urgent, ask it, is it necessary? These moments of restraint are not weakness. They are the beginning of power, the kind of power that brings peace. Many people believe that freedom is the ability to do whatever one desires at any moment. The idea is romantic and appealing, freedom as the absence of limits. But this definition leads us down a path of endless reaction. If every thought, feeling, or urge is obeyed without examination, then who is truly in control? The person or the impulse? When we are driven solely by desire or fear, we are not free. We are bound by the very forces we refuse to confront. An uncontrolled mind becomes a servant to its own fluctuations. One moment it craves pleasure, the next it avoids discomfort. In such a state, freedom becomes illusion. The body moves, the voice speaks, but the self is absent. What appears as freedom from the outside is internally slavery to untrained impulses. The ability to choose, to say yes or no with intention, is what separates freedom from mere reaction. Without this ability, there is no autonomy, only habit. To live freely means to be aware of our inner workings. It means recognizing the thoughts that rise, observing the emotions that surge, and still choosing our actions with clarity. Restraint is not about denial, but about alignment. It allows us to act from a place of stability rather than compulsion. Each time we make a conscious choice, instead of following a reflex, we are reclaiming our freedom. We are stepping out of the cycle of reaction and into the quiet strength of awareness. Consider a person who is quick to anger. The feeling arises and they lash out. They believe they are expressing themselves. But if they pause for just a moment, if they observe the anger instead of becoming it, they create space. In that space lies the power to choose another path. Perhaps silence, perhaps understanding, perhaps stillness. And in that pause, they are no longer controlled by the anger. They are free from it. That is the essence of conscious choice. Freedom, then, is not wildness. It is not the lack of structure. It is precision. It is presence. It is the deliberate use of energy and awareness. The person who reacts without thought is pushed around by life like a leaf in the wind. The one who chooses with intention is like a mountain, still, grounded, and unmoved by passing storms. This kind of freedom cannot be given. It must be cultivated through discipline, attention, and the willingness to pause. In every moment of life, we are met with stimuli, Words spoken to us, events unfolding, emotions rising, thoughts appearing. These stimuli press on us like waves on the shore, each one inviting a response. Most people respond without hesitation. An insult triggers anger. A craving leads to indulgence. A fear demands retreat. But in truth, between every stimulus and every response, there is a space. It is subtle, often missed, yet always present. And in that space lies our freedom to choose. This space is where restraint begins. Restraint is not simply holding back or forcing stillness. It is becoming aware of that space and resting within it. It is the moment when we do not rush to act, but instead observe the rising of our inner energy. For some, this space may feel uncomfortable at first, because silence is unfamiliar and action feels more natural. But the longer we stay in that space, the more we begin to see clearly. We see the emotion for what it is. We see the impulse forming. And most importantly, we realize that we are not those things. We are the witness. The mind, when untrained, narrows that space until it feels as if there is no choice at all. One emotion, one reaction, one thought, one action. This is how people become trapped in cycles of regret. But restraint widens the gap between what happens and how we respond. It gives us room to breathe. It allows us to feel anger without becoming angry, to feel fear without being afraid, to feel desire without being consumed by it. In that widening of space, the grip of unconscious behavior begins to loosen. The power of this space becomes clearer the more we observe it. With time and practice, we find that we no longer have to react immediately. A sharp word no longer demands a sharp reply. A strong craving no longer commands obedience. We begin to act not out of compulsion, but out of clarity. This clarity is not cold or emotionless. It is alive, peaceful, and centered. It allows us to respond in a way that aligns with our values, not just our emotions. In this space, our higher self awakens, the part of us that sees with compassion, that speaks with wisdom, that moves with intention. The space becomes sacred, a quiet place inside where the world's noise cannot enter. And the more we enter this space, the more we live from it. Not everything that demands a reaction deserves one. Not every impulse must be followed. In the stillness between stimulus and response, we find the power to shape our path with mindfulness and grace. Restraint is often misunderstood. Many think it means forcefully holding back emotions, desires, or actions, as if we are locking something inside, pretending it does not exist. But suppression is not restraint. Suppression creates inner tension. It hides what we feel, but does not resolve it. What is suppressed waits in the dark, growing stronger, waiting to burst out at the next opportunity. Restraint, on the other hand, is rooted in understanding. It acknowledges what arises within us without letting it rule us. To practice restraint is to meet our inner world with open eyes. When anger comes, we notice it. When desire arises, we observe it. We do not run from these energies, nor do we immediately follow them. Instead, we sit with them, breathe through them, and study them. In this process, a subtle but powerful transformation happens. Emotion becomes information. The feeling that once controlled us becomes something we can learn from. Restraint allows us to hear what the emotion is saying without obeying its every demand. This is where clarity is born. Not the clarity of the intellect alone, but a deeper clarity that comes from presence. We begin to see that feelings are not enemies and thoughts are not facts. They are waves moving through the ocean of the mind. With restraint, we no longer identify with every thought or emotion. We watch them come and go like clouds across a still sky. And as we watch, we see more clearly what is true, what is useful, and what is simply noise. Self-awareness is the foundation of restraint. Without knowing ourselves, our habits, our triggers, our patterns, we cannot direct ourselves wisely. Restraint trains us to look inward, not to control through force, but to understand through stillness. When we are aware of how we are moved, we begin to take back the reins. We shift from being passengers of our inner life to becoming conscious participants in it. This self-awareness brings not rigidity, but freedom. We are no longer at war with ourselves. We are in harmony. So restraint, when rightly understood, is gentle. It is not a clenched fist, but an open palm. It is the steady gaze that sees what is without judgment or reaction. From that gaze comes peace, and from peace, wise action. Restraint is not something we impose upon ourselves. It is something we grow into as our understanding deepens and our awareness expands. Mastery of the self does not mean becoming flawless. It means becoming familiar with all parts of oneself. The calm and the restless, the generous and the selfish, the disciplined and the distracted. True mastery is not about erasing these aspects, but about seeing them clearly, understanding their origins, and learning how to guide them rather than be ruled by them. This kind of mastery cannot be imposed from the outside. It must be cultivated through deep attention and patient effort. It is quiet, internal work, often unnoticed by others, but it defines the quality of a person's life. When a person begins to master themselves, they no longer live at the mercy of external conditions. Praise does not inflate them, and criticism does not diminish them. Desires no longer pull them endlessly in all directions. Fear may still whisper, but it no longer dictates their choices. This steadiness, this ability to remain centered regardless of what arises, is a profound freedom. It means that your peace is no longer determined by others, by outcomes, or by the changing circumstances of the world. Without self-mastery, the mind becomes a battlefield. Thoughts race without pause, emotions surge without direction, and the body follows like a servant to a disorganized master. But through restraint and awareness, we train the mind to be still, to listen, and to obey only when the command is wise. In time, the emotions begin to follow this stillness. They lose their urgency. They become less like storms and more like weather, observed, understood, and allowed to pass without damage. This inner order is not repression, it is alignment. To master the self is to know when to act and when to be still. It is to choose silence when words would cause harm and to speak when truth must be heard. It is to rise early when comfort calls for sleep, to walk away when the ego demands victory. Every small act of restraint is a step towards self-mastery. These choices may seem invisible to the outside world, but they create deep strength within. And this strength becomes visible in how a person carries themselves, in their calm, in their discipline, in their quiet confidence. The one who has mastered themselves does not need to control others. They are not threatened by challenge or overwhelmed by change. They carry their freedom with them, not the freedom to indulge every impulse, but the freedom to shape their life from within. This is the highest form of freedom, not being free from responsibility or effort, but being free to choose your path with full awareness, even when that path is steep.